The political party as such is still a myth in Meghalaya because fighting the elections today are organized groups that come together in the name of political parties only during elections.
The regional parties are supposed to be the lifeblood of a democracy, especially in a country like India, which is so diverse and which needs a more nuanced approach to development. Do you think the presence of regional forces in a coalition helps to balance out the national narrative and focus on what is good for Meghalaya, and compelling the national parties also to think of what is good for Meghalaya first and the nation?
You want the best of governance from the minimum number of MLAs. Is that possible? Why did you reject Paul Lyngdoh? Why did you reject Jemino Mautha? Why did you reject Aden Masayomaj, PNCM, when you want a strong, vocal, articulate government? You are the same people who reject these names, and you are the same people who say that the government is a failure. You can't have both together.
Good evening, viewers. We are here as a team of the Shillong Times at the residence of Mr. Paul Lyngdoh, working president of the United Democratic Party and former student leader. He is known to be sharp-witted and intuitive on matters of politics. So welcome to this program, Paul. And thank you for giving us this candid interview on a host of issues that we will be raising. My first question is, the regional parties are supposed to be the lifeblood of a democracy, especially in a country like India, which is so diverse and which needs a more nuanced approach to development. Also, regional parties are supposed to flag local and regional interests and to safeguard attempts at bringing, a new kind of narrow nationalism that we see in the country today. Yet we find that regional parties have always had to align with the national parties to cobble up a coalition. What are your views on the infirmities leading to this sort of situation?
Well, first and foremost, I think it is very important, and this may seem shocking to most viewers, when I say that the party system is yet to take roots in Meghalaya. The political party as such is still a myth in Meghalaya because fighting the elections today are organized groups that come together in the name of political parties only during elections. But post-elections and in other normal times, these are a cluster of individuals who stick together because it is convenient, because it promotes their business interest, and because you need numbers in order to be able to cobble up a government. So to that extent, the idea of a political party itself in Meghalaya is still at a very nascent stage. Two, if you ask me why the regional parties have shown a trend of decline, one reason is the strength that the regional parties managed to muster came during the first 2 decades of the Hill State movement. These were the men and women at the forefront of the struggle for a separate state. And in return, when they fought for elections, they were rewarded for the fact that, yes, it was they who were at the forefront, at the helm of affairs. Leaders like B.B. Lyngdoh, H.S. Lyngdoh, S.D.D. Nichols Roy, Captain Sangma, all were leaders of the Hill State movement. And if you go back to history, you will find that at one point of time, the APHLC, just having the symbol of the flower was enough to make any candidate win from the APHLC, meaning that the grip of the party was so strong. There was an emotional attachment to the brand name APHLC. Later on, when Paul Lyngdoh became a dissenter and decided to form the HSPDP, which had protested against the idea of the sub-state in 1970. The HSPDP also became strong because it had a leader with a huge mass appeal, Paul Lyngdoh. And I still can recall my father, who was a staunch HSPDP supporter. I recall the conversations of men in those days, that sometimes you don't have, when you don't have enough money to say hire a cab, then you have to walk on foot. They would say, housing. Let's go walking on the lion, referring to the lion symbol. And anybody contesting on an HSPDP ticket in the West Khas Hills is assured of victory without the electorate actually knowing what the candidate looked like. That was the party system in Meghalaya in the first 2 decades of statehood. Yes, that was the appeal. However, after the split of the APHLC, leading to the formation of the PDIC, and later on we tried to cobble up unity through the HPU and subsequently the UDP. You will always meet people who keep moving in and out of these parties, and the grip of the party system became very loose.
So what are the pitfalls of aligning with a national party? Do you think the presence of regional forces in a coalition helps to, to balance out the national narrative and focus on what is good for Meghalaya, and compelling the national parties also to think of what is good for Meghalaya first and the nation?
To me, India is not a nation. Rather, it is a conglomeration of nationalities. Something like the United States of America. In fact, we should have encouraged the idea of United States of India.
Larger federalism.
Yes, with federalism as the moving force of such a nation, such a country. But now that we have accepted the reality that we are part and parcel of this heterogeneous country with so many diverse differences, cultures, food habits, religions, castes, so on and so forth, we are to be cautious of two things. Whether aligning with a national party would dilute our agenda as a state, would somehow compromise our agenda as a state, or the alternative to it, which is, are we able to push our own indigenous, local-based issues and raise them at the platform of the national party? I think that will answer your aligning yourself with the national party.
But we see that happening very little, because we have about 25 MPs from the region. We've never heard them, calling out for a common unity of purpose on any issue relating to the Northeast. So I don't understand why we don't have this. We used to have a Northeast MPs forum, but I think it's disintegrated because of the political pulls and pressures.
There is too much of ethnic conflicts happening at all levels, whether you talk at the level of student unions or political parties here in the Northeast. The game of one-upmanship is ever on. And suppose somebody is to be elected as chairman of the group, you will always have someone else from a different ethnic group opposing that nomination, not because they like or dislike the person, but because he belongs to such and such a tribe and a state. That is a common feature here in the Northeast, which is why the NEMP's forum has not worked. But when I speak of our identifying ourselves with the mainland, I think we have to understand that we do need a lot of diplomacy, a very cautious approach when we say that we are aligning ourselves with a national party. You look at the Congress, which nationally as a matter of policy has always stood against, say, the implementation of the ILP. Dr. Mukul Sangma was in government for an entire number of 8 years and very steadfastly spoke against ILP because that was the stand of the Congress party. One fine day they suddenly changed their mind, took a U-turn and spoke on behalf of the ILP when they were in the opposition because they needed public support, sympathy, and also because the Congress at the center has become so weak that it would allow its state units to take decisions based on their own interests and not in the interest of the central leadership.
So the UDP has taken many twists and turns before arriving at its present avatar. Started off as the APHLC, which, as you said earlier, was very, very dear to the people of this state, with the symbol of the rose. And then it became the Hill People's Union. And finally now it's the UDP, United Democratic Party. Can you explain why this change was needed, this transition or transformation from one name to another name, change of nomenclature?
This primarily emerged from the fact that a substantial number of leaders from the HSPDP wanted their party to merge with the HPU at that point of time. So the HPU was formed with a sizable number of members from the HSPDP. However, realizing that they could not dissolve the HSPDP since the president was very insistent on keeping HSPDP alive, they didn't want to simply come and join the APHLC because then they would be seen as defectors to the APHLC. So they had to cobble up a new entity. And likewise, before the UDP was formed, we were very close to having Hooping Stone as the president of the UDP. That offer was made to him. But he turned it down at the 11th hour after a large number of his followers had agreed to join the original party. So again, we have to give it a different name so that they also are not seen as defectors to the new party, but as merging and forming a new political party. Hence these different avatars.
So the regional parties have been here since the beginning of the state, but we haven't really seen a roadmap for development for Meghalaya. We haven't seen an economic roadmap. We haven't seen any vision for education. And rural development is really at an all-time low, especially, agriculture. Agriculture is in a very, very poor state, and for the first time, I think the farmers went and met the governor as a group to protest. I think they took a cue from the other farmers' protest in the rest of India. So what do you think are the development priorities right now for Meghalaya?
Well, I'm reminded of the former Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir, when she was asked about the enigma of Israel being such a strong country. She told the journalist, look at us, 2/3 of our country is desert, we have no agriculture, no mineral deposits, no flora and fauna, but our biggest strength is the human individual. I would like to say that the greatest strength of Meghalaya too is its human individuals, and it's a component that few have realized. You will find it very natural for a Khasi to be welcoming. Yes. Somebody who loses his way, a stranger, will be guided, will be told, you go this way, walk that a few meters and then take left. That is innate in us. So by those strengths that we have, our friendly nature, our communication skills, our education system, which is English based, is already a powerhouse for us. And therefore, I think whatever sectors of the economy we choose to zero in as part of our growth trajectory, it has to be based on the human individuals.
But this human potential is largely urban based. If you look at the rural areas, I think they're just struggling to cope up with the curriculum and other things. So isn't it also important to think of vocational needs? Because our people are good with their hands. They're good craftsmen, they're good, doing different things, producing different artifacts and all. But these hardly find a market.
If you talk of the rural economy and youths in the rural areas, the fact is they are adept at making use of their hands. And the number of houses that are being built in Shillong today, people generally say, if you have more money, spend on Khasi carpenters, because their craft, their skill is far ahead than that of a non-Khasi. These are the skills that we already have. All we need is to ensure that we upscale institutes like the ITIs, because then we can hone and mold them more professionally. But the skills are certainly there. And that is why I keep saying that we optimize what we have in us, so that I always believe in that saying that who you are is God's gift to you. What you become is your gift to God.
So during your tenure as KSU president, the CNAM was formed. I won't say the full form of CNAM. And it was formed with the intent of taking up some of the very contentious issues like the ILP, the railhead, and then resolving the issue in floods. Mm. So why did you leave CNAM and join the UDP?
I think the word leave is not correct here, because I didn't leave. The party decided to merge with the UDP following our debacle in 2008 as a political organization. We had formed CNAM with very high hopes in 2002. um, because then the then government had become very unpopular, and when it came to elections, only two of us, Lambor Malngiang and myself, got elected. We did our best to address some of the pressing issues. Now, coming back to why we have to merge KNUM. We, in 2008, we found that the results were, despite all the outcry about MBOs, and I still remember a rally held at Malki where a lot of, it was attended by close to 50,000 people, and a good number of them said, we need somebody like you. So with that kind of courage and guts to say what has to be said. So next time, come up with a team, 15, 20 of you. We, the public, will back you up, we will finance you, and KNUM will capture the seats of power in this secretariat. That was 2005. In 2008, I was the only KNUM candidate to have won the elections. So that made me sit up and think. Politics is a different ball game, not the kind of politics that you identify with youth movements or student politics. Also, we realized that the UDP was aging fast. It was led by people in their 60s, and those who were in their 50s were in the youth wing. That element of youth was lacking. So we joined, and that included the current MLA of KNUM, Adalbert Nongrum, who had also attended a meeting that decided for the merger of KNUM with the UDP.
So the UDP is part of the Northeast Democratic Alliance, yes, led by the BJP leader Himanta Biswa Sarma. I remember that this created quite a flutter when the UDP decided to work with NEDA, considering that it's a BJP-led alliance. In fact, in an interview to a section of the media in 2018, you had said that NEDA is a political platform for the development of the Northeast and not a pre-poll alliance. But I think by now you would admit that the NEDA is more than a regional development platform. It's emerging as a front for the BJP to expand its base in the Northeast, to strike out roots in all of the states. So what are your views today on being part of the NEDA? Have you changed your views, or do you still maintain that it's important to be part of it?
Well, for a start, NEDA has almost become dormant. We have not met in a very long time. Two, there are far too many constituents in it that very often meetings end with issues of conflict. When you discuss issues of common interest, then the issue of infiltration would come up, and one state would blame the other state. Then when you come to issues of the border dispute, to that extent, I see NEDA as a non-starter. But yes, as an economic think tank, since this brings together political executives and representatives from the various governments, it does help. It does help to iron out your differences, try to carve a common
Do you have a set of ideologies for NEDA?
We have not worked on those. As I said, we hardly meet, and in spite of the fact that we are together in NEDA, when it came to issues like ILP, we stood our ground. We brought a resolution in the House, in the Assembly, if you remember, 2017, to the extent that we stopped the proceedings of the House when the Speaker disallowed this motion for discussion on ILP. And these are pointers that on issues of principle, we stick to our ground. When it comes to, say, issues like the Look East policy or the Act East policy, as it is now being called, we have to be together, because you can't plan for the entire region sitting here in Shillong. So I think that fine distinction has to be made. But to say that it serves a political purpose, how would it solve? I mean, if the BJP wants anything to do with the UDP, it would simply talk to the UDP, interact with the UDP. Why involve the MNF? Why involve the Manipur People's Party? It's pointless.
So all these months you have been, I think, seeing on social media and including newspapers that a lot of people are making fun of the, poking fun at the UDP, saying that you do not have footing in Garo Hills, and you have never been able to produce a strong leader in the Garo Hills to lead the party, because of which you haven't been able to capture the hearts and minds of people in Garo Hills. And if you look at the HSPDP, it's been reduced to a party in the West Khasi Hills. So what is this, this disease that debilitates the regional parties from growing from strength to strength, and with each coming election getting more seats? Why is this lack of robustness? And why is it that we don't see your women's wing come out, on issues, your youth wing come out? In fact, the youth wing seems to have really weakened.
We were always seen as an alternative to the Congress, a party which is rooted to the soil. And in fact, at one point of time in the 1980s, we had 9 HPU MLAs in the Garo Hills. 9 MLAs from the Garo Hills sector is not a matter of joke for the HPU. However, with the emergence of the NCP, when Purno Sangma parted ways along with Sharad Pawar, and they left the Congress, he came back to strengthen the NCP, which today has become the NPP. And the space occupied by the HPU was then reoccupied by Purno Sangma and his new party, which is why our presence became truncated. As far as the general level of the performance of the party, please bear in mind that this is one of the youngest assemblies with the largest anti-incumbency factor inbuilt in the current house. 33 MLAs lost their assembly seats, which means you have more than 50% of newcomers. Yes. And who do we have in the government? We have from the party, Rumbui, ex-MLA with no experience as a minister. We had Kerman Shilla, first-timer. We had Babrol, a first-timer. He had never held any office earlier on. Then we have Nujor Sunga, we have Balajit Sindram, we have Pius Marwan, all below their 40s and with first time experience in the house. So in terms of experience, ability, articulation, thinking process, you would understand that what they could do potentially and what they are doing, there is a wide gap between.
So isn't there a need then for political management, for a training on how to manage politics, how to manage governance?
You train the elected representatives at two levels. One is make them familiar with the procedures and conduct rules of business of the house. That is a different thing. How do you move in an adjournment motion? How do you raise questions and supplementaries? That is one part of it. But then, how do you deal with file work? How do you make decisions based on a file that has come up to your table as a minister, for which you have taken an oath? Now I am surprised to hear this, that there are even cases where files are not sent to the minister but go directly to the chief minister. This is something shocking.
This violates the conduct of business.
So we have reached that point because some of the ministers, with all due respect to them, have not been acquainted with these rules. There are the rules of executive business, for instance. I've mentioned this a couple of times, that we have rules of executive business, and you're not supposed to work by violating those rules.
Okay, let me come to this very controversial issue of the palm oil cultivation or the oil palm cultivation for Meghalaya. The central government is pushing this into all the northeastern states and the Andamans, and we know how destructive oil palm cultivation is. So why has the UDP as a party been silent on this, both within the assembly and outside?
In fact, the party has met very recently. We are collecting information, inputs. We would not like to approach the government and oppose something based on hearsay, but as a matter of fact, we have taken a decision to oppose the palm oil project, knowing it's going to spell disaster for the state, and we will take this to its logical end. We've instructed the party general secretary to start working on a draft that will include all the vital points as to why this should not be given a go-ahead.
We spoke about an economic roadmap, but I'm looking at the economic roadmap of Meghalaya vis-a-vis coal mining, vis-a-vis limestone mining, and now boulders.
Well, these are serious issues of concern, which I think need a strong and decisive government to take decisions on. You know for a fact that we have a peculiar land holding system which indirectly facilitates all these murky activities, quarrying and coal mining, which benefits a handful of people to the disadvantage of the majority and of future generations. We have to come up with a policy that will put a kind of an embargo on such activities, and it would be good if Meghalaya is able to formulate and propose such an embargo on its own, rather than having the NGT, having this body or that body coming to the state, because again, those entities do not have a thorough understanding of this place and its need. If it is done by government, there will be a fine balance between livelihood and the need to sustain lives, to sustain the environment, because environment itself is life. So that balancing can only happen when you have a government that is in constant touch with the people and know the ground realities, rather than having somebody who stays in Pinewood for a week and then comes up with a report which consists of so many half-truths.
See, for most of the people who understand politics, they find it very troubling that the MDA does not have a common minimum program yet. I mean, you're coming to the end of the 5-year term. So without a common minimum program, how do you press forward? How do you bring together your ideologies, the ideologies of NPP, the KNAM and the other partners?
This is really perplexing to me, but since I'm not an MLA, I'm not privy to a lot of information, but the CMP is a vital document, is a roadmap for your next 5 years. I was told that initially Pak Windoh Lanong was supposed to draft. So you can find out from him what is the status of
No, but since he's UDP, so I think it's important that you find out.
I have no idea. I was only told once that he had started the draft, but yeah, it is very unfortunate that you have a government that runs on an autopilot, day-to-day basis without a proper roadmap. It's certainly a huge minus point for the alliance.
So now we're hearing a lot about climate change and climate action. Why is the UDP not talking about it at all? It's completely silent. Does the UDP have a view on the climate crisis and what's the way forward? What climate actions do you propose?
Well, thank you for bringing this up. It is an important, certainly an important point. When we the other day sat to discuss about the proposed rail link up to Shillong, one of the points raised then was that this would be disastrous for the ecology. It would lead to a lot of greenery being removed, and so the environment was a major concern. But yes, as a party, we need to do much more. Given the location of Meghalaya, and also given the fact that we have the wettest places on earth, and
hotspot basically, like biodiversity hotspot.
Yes, in every sense of the term, Meghalaya is an amazing attraction for travelers. And when I was holding in charge of the Department of Sports, I remember teams from the mainland, from Chandigarh, from Mumbai, camping in Shillong before they travel to Europe, because they need to have their conditioning here. So I mean, those are the strengths of this place that we inhabitants of Meghalaya are not aware of. I remember the ambassador of Israel sometime in 2008 had come to meet me at the secretariat, and he came out of his hotel room in Pinewood, and when he met me, he gave me a big hug and said that he has seen a miracle. So I said, what miracle? He said, the rain that I saw from the hotel up to the secretariat is the kind of rain that we would get in 1 year in Israel. No, those are the anecdotes that I recall.
So, but these are things we take for granted.
So unless you have a policy for conserving the ecology in the long run, we will run short of these miracles very soon.
Yes, we are already running short of drinking water. We see the problem that the urban population is facing. Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to ask you about what you've read recently, the poor nutritional status of women and children in Meghalaya, the stunting, and that our indicators are showing us to be equal to Somalia. And your minister, I mean, the UDP person is a minister for social welfare, but he doesn't seem to have a grip on these things. He doesn't speak much. He doesn't, I don't know whether it registers that this is a huge problem, because many of those who are stunted, many of those who you know, because it affects their cognitive domain, they will be left behind. They'll fall out of the system. What will happen to that huge population of dropouts?
There certainly is a clear lack of understanding of the extent of this issue of malnutrition. I do not think it has registered in the minds of many of our policy makers. But the fact of the matter is that although we have reached a point where everybody gets to have his 2 shares of meals per day, the nutritious content of those meals are very questionable. We need to redirect the attention of the social welfare department and the health department, because these are vital indicators.
There needs to be a convergence, which is not there.
It is not there. It is not there, and one of the major reasons is also our lack of manpower. Meghalaya's health department would easily need about 500 more doctors, 500 more nurses, and with the lack of manpower also comes the political pulls and pressures for postings to places which are very close to Shillong, and nobody wants to go to the remote villages where this particular phenomenon is more pronounced. Now, unless you have health visitors, unless you have food grains and food items made available on time in a sustained manner to these villages, this problem will not solve on its own. And it has to be realized as an issue that threatens the lives of human beings. You know, the kind of attention that we are paying to COVID-19.
Yes.
I think this deserves much more attention, because this involves your entire physiology and growth of a person. It is not something that can be cured when you have a strong immune system. You know, like COVID, you take 2 tablets of paracetamol and you're back on your 2 feet. This is a problem that debilitates the human system. It should be a priority, and I assure you that I will push this through in the party.
So, how has your experience been, or the experience of the UDP working with the NPP? Are you looking to the same kind of arrangement in 2023?
I think it's too early to say something like that right now, because we would like to play a much more dominant role, assert ourselves more in 2023. You see, when you hear people complaining, when you hear people using abusive adjectives about the UDP, you have to ask those same people, why did you then elect only 7 of us in a house of 60? Why did you? You want the best of governance from the minimum number of MLAs. Is that possible? Why did you reject Paul Lyngdoh? Why did you reject Jemino Mauto? Why did you reject Aden Basayomaj, PNCM, when you want a strong, vocal, articulate government? You are the same people who reject these names, and you are the same people who say that the government is a failure. You can't have both together. You say the assembly lacks speakers. When you
all the articulate ones are out.
You elect people who export limestones. You elect people who sell dried fish. How do you expect them to perform on your behalf?
Okay, so before we come to the end of this interview or conversation, I should say, tell us something about your private life. How do you spend your time? And you've been really, withdrawing from the limelight. How have you been using your time?
I've not deliberately withdrawn myself from public life. I'm still very...
In fact, some people are wondering if you will be contesting the next election.
The people have given me a break. I'm just taking that break. Using my time to write stories.
But is there anything called a break for a politician?
Well, at least they have not elected me, so it boils down to it being a break. Although I continue to meet people, and now I am in the executive committee of the KHADC, I find more time for myself. I've spent it optimally, making the best use of it. I've been able to write as many as 18 songs during the pandemic shutdown. We're recording those songs. We're on the verge of releasing the album. Also, I've written short stories, I think 10 of them, which I'm brushing up, giving them the final touch now. Apart from that, I try to read. I have a huge library, and I feel guilty that my speed of reading has also not matched up with the number of books that I own. I'd like to read them as far as is possible, and I also am taking better care of my fitness and health. Yes.
Can you sing 1 or 2 lines of the songs that you composed?
Times are bad, life is hard, life is good for you. Was down as you found, as you watched the breaking news. We tried to make some sense as the world come to the end. Cause we watch lives being grounded, carriers and projects pounded. We find ourselves in the debris of this wave. For too long we've been cocooned.
So thank you very much, Paul, for this very candid conversation. We wish you all the best, and we hope you'll get back into the assembly.